Hi friends, welcome back to Farm Girl Diaries. It is a beautiful, beautiful day outside. I was just outside for a while. I came inside and I had a little bit of an inspiration. And I wanted to be honest about where my inspiration came from. So this video is going to be about the idea of wanting to start a garden. And my inspiration for this came from that 1870s homestead. And if you're watching this video, I would request that you go watch Rachel's video, 1870s homestead, that 1870s homestead. She just did a 3-part series. It's her latest videos. Well, as of today, it's her latest videos. And today's March 13th, where she talked about the plants to plant when you're growing a garden. So she talked about some of her favorites, and she talked about some of the best like perennials. And then she talked about her third video, which is the one I watched today, which kind of really hit home for me. She talks about what's called the Dirty Dozen. And if you're not familiar with the Dirty Dozen, it is the vegetables that we buy at the grocery store and which ones have the highest quantitative amount of pesticides on them. Even after you wash them, it's what we ingest. So that's kind of where I'm getting this inspiration, and it kind of gave me a little bit more inspiration on why people may be starting gardens this year. So like I said, I think understanding the Dirty Dozen and what is being sold to us at the grocery stores, I think is incredibly important. And I think that's number one for me of why you should start a garden. I think that this year, I think every year we get a little closer to more and more people kind of want to join this community. And I want people to join this community. I'm very much, I've become a prepper, which boggles my mind. I never thought I would be somebody that is considered, that would consider themselves a prepper. But I am. And I am because I don't trust that somebody else is going to look out for me the same way that I would look out for me and my family. So when it comes to the food, I don't want to ingest food that's bad for me. And I've made cuts in all of my lives. I have many, many videos. I think I said all of my lives. I meant in my whole life. I've made changes in my whole life. There's only one, my whole life. And I've made these changes to be healthier. And so with that said, my goal is not to be organic. Organic is a byproduct of how I'm living my life for the most part. So what I mean by that is I have really taken on the reins of making everything from scratch as much as I can. Things taste better when you make them from scratch. Once you learn those skills, they taste better. I know a lot of people say, I can't cook. I swear, keep practicing. You get better. And so one of the things that I've been struggling to master is tortillas. I have the perfect recipe. It is delicious. It tastes so good. But my tortillas come out thick. No matter how thin I roll them, they still puff up when you cook them, and they still get nice and they're like a pita pocket. But I wanted to make chicken enchiladas this weekend, and I'm like, I don't have tortillas. I'm not going to the grocery store to buy tortillas when I have all the ingredients to make tortillas here. And I really enjoy making tortillas. It's the repetitive process of rolling and cooking and rolling and cooking that I just put on music, get a glass of wine, and I just go at it. So I made these tortillas for these chicken enchiladas, and they puffed up, and I was like, well, we're going to use them. We're not letting them go to waste. We're going to use them. And when I tell you, I think that was an insane success. So these tortillas are fluffier, like they're thicker. They're like a nice little bit of a pita pocket. Like they're like kind of like that side, that thickness, kind of that mouth feel like a pita pocket. And I think they took my chicken enchiladas to a whole different level, which sounds weird. I understand that sounds weird because chicken, like enchiladas, should have like a thin tortilla. But anyhow, my whole point of that is to say, even though that these tortillas are obviously not a success, anyone that actually knows how to make tortillas is going to look at me and say bad things to me. I think that, again, they're not a success, but I thought they were very good, and I'm not at all upset with how they turned out for at least this dish. I don't know if I would want to eat tacos in them, but who knows? I don't think I want to eat enchiladas in them either, and I think it's delicious. So a lot of things, even if it's not a success, it's still delicious. And everything is so much better when it's homemade. I swear, it just tastes better when it's homemade versus store-bought. And you know what's in it. So that was my first push, right? My first push was to really start kind of making everything from scratch. And then when I really started getting into the garden and canning and preserving and all this stuff, I saw how much food I can make from the garden. So now I would say, and I think I'm being a little conservative here, but I would say a solid 80% of my food that I eat in my house that I make is free from chemicals. It is healthy. It is completely organic. It is a much better quality than I'm buying anywhere else. Now, when I go out to eat, when I go to my parents' house or friends' houses or wherever I'm going, I don't tell them, oh my God, you didn't grow that pepper that you want to feed me? Oh, well, I can't eat here. I don't do that. I still eat normally out in public. I don't stop myself from going out in public, but I have kind of sort of transitioned my brain a little bit. Being broke helps. But like, for instance, the other day I really wanted Chinese food and I was really feeling beef and broccoli, and I didn't feel like leaving my house, so I would have had the food delivered to me, which I never do. And the whole like thing for like one serving of beef and broccoli, and the Chinese food has gotten smaller, so I'm not gonna have leftovers, or maybe my belly has gotten bigger. One serving with delivery was gonna cost like $21. And I'm like sitting there, I'm like, I can't bring myself to spend $21 on Chinese food. So I ended up making my own version of Chinese food, and I thought it was delicious. I really, really enjoyed it. Just recently, I think it was Saturday, I wanted a burger. It's like 5:15. I decided, oh my gosh, I have to have a burger. And so I looked up all the different burger joints around here, again, for delivery, because I don't feel like leaving my house. And none of them were what I wanted. And I'm like, I'm sitting here as I'm looking through like the menus of these burger joints. I'm like, I can make a better burger. And I did. I got a frozen burger from the fridge, frozen buns from the freezer, and cooked the thing up. And by 6 o'clock, I had a burger and fries and a milkshake. And it was, again, delicious. It's so much better when you make it yourself. But that's kind of the push that I've done. Like, now I see all of this food that I could easily get and easily buy and easily bring into the house, and partly laziness, partly because I'm broke, but partly because I know I can make it better, I don't do that. So it really takes a while to train your mind and to train yourself and your habits. You know, I was lazy, I didn't feel like cooking, but I know that burger's not gonna be near as good as what I know I could just make if I got off the couch. So all of this to say, I think now is the time. If you're thinking about starting a garden, I think now is the perfect time to start a garden. There's so many reasons, and there's so much you can do with the garden. So going back to the reasons, you know, we're talking about the number of pesticides. Again, watch Rachel's video where she talks about the dirty dozen. Things that you eat the skins of, strawberries, apples, those fruits, even after you wash them, still have so many pesticides on. Peppers are one of the worst vegetables. One of the worst, they're fruits actually, that's a whole other argument. But they're one of the worst things because they have so many chemicals in them. They actually, I think she said, I got this from Rachel, I think she said they have 100, like the study they did, they found 100 different chemicals on the peppers, even after the peppers were washed. So definitely go watch that video. It is incredibly interesting. So that's probably the number one reason, is I want to cut down on these preservatives these chemicals that we're putting in our body. It cannot be good for us. I just watched Jess at Roots and Refuge. All these other YouTubers are such great inspiration. So if you're not already watching them, which I feel like you have to be if you're on my channel, but if you're not, you need to watch them because there is so much great information out there. This year, they just came out with the first GMO vegetable seed. And there's been a lot of talk about that. I'm not going to get into that talk about what the value or the con, the pro or the con is to that GMO seed, that it's available at a consumer level. But Jess brought up the very good point that I know, but I never thought of, that all of our stuff that's grown commercially is heavily GMO. So we have corn and wheat, they're all heavily modified. But corn is an example. We can grow so much corn very easily, very cheaply in a limited space. It's not all sustainable for the earth, but we do it. And because we have such an overabundance of corn, we put corn in everything. The corn is a filler for everything. So if you look at a lot of products, corn syrup or corn meal is in so much stuff because it's a great filler. Cereals, it's in a ton of cereals. Corn syrup is in a ton of things. When they grow corn, they have modified this corn that they can spray a pesticide over the field and the corn will not react to the pesticide or the weed killer. So they can keep the weeds down, they can keep the pests down, and the corn will not react to it. The corn will continue to grow. But what that means for us is our bodies are not modified to not be affected by the poison, by the pest control. So even though the corn isn't affected, we are still affected. And it's in everything. And so that's one of the things that just has me so kind of like it's one of my biggest reasons for why I'm doing this, is because who knows over time what this is doing to us. You know, ADD, ADHD, autism, Asperger's, cancers, dementias, did I say Alzheimer's? All of these diseases seem to be, now again, I'm not a scientist, I'm not doing the research, and so take that as you will, but all of these diseases are so rampant. And I'm not saying they didn't exist before, but there was a direct correlation between the, what's what I'm looking for? There was a direct correlation between when convenience stores kind of came on the market and that convenience food item and medical issues. There's a direct correlation there. So I don't want to get into the science of it. I'm not a scientist. I don't want to be a scientist. And I don't want to kind of do the research on the numbers and the facts and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I don't want to put that stuff in my body or my family's bodies because I don't know what it does. I think we can all agree that none of us really want to eat Roundup. We don't want to have Roundup in our food. So this is kind of like all over the place. So that's a great reason to start a garden. Then probably the other reason that's so prevalent right now is the cost of food. Food is so expensive, and the organic food, which honestly isn't the same level as organic as I currently am, is still so much more expensive. The cost of strawberries, blueberries, peppers. I've been on a kick for peppers for years, how expensive peppers are. It is insane. So if you're thinking about it or you haven't made that jump yet, I think now is the time to make that jump. So I'm going to kind of switch a little bit, this is the whole point of this video. And I do get a little round up while I talk about this. I go on the soapbox just because I'm so passionate about the quality of food that we are getting. And it's embarrassing. It's honestly embarrassing what our country allows us to have in our bodies, whereas other countries, the whole European Union, what the European Union allows in their bodies versus ours it's astounding. If you've never looked up, and this is an interesting look up, there's many articles about this. Google like what foods are different in the US versus Europe, and things like Doritos, ketchup, McDonald's, French fries. There's a whole list, and then you can kind of go down that rabbit hole and see, you know, these are chemicals or these are foods that the European Union does not allow. They say, no, you cannot have this in our states. So that's a very interesting rabbit hole to go down. But in addition, the cost of everything is so expensive. I think now is the time to start thinking about how to kind of cut those costs for yourself. Since I've put in my garden, I have drastically cut my costs. I've drastically, I think, cut my grocery budget. And I think that's why, I live on my own. I own a house, and I do a lot of things to the house, and this is a new cup as of 2 days ago. So like, I'm not living in like squalor, right? The reason I'm not living in squalor is because I grow and make so much of my food. So let's talk about two things. This video is going to take a little bit of a detour. I'm going to talk about two things. The first one I'm going to talk about is what you should plant and how you should plant it. And the second thing is what to do with the things that you plant to kind of like replace going to the grocery store. So the first thing I'm going to say is think about your perennials. So that you want to know what zone you're in when you start thinking about a garden. And the second thing is I want you to think about your perennials. The perennials are the things that are going to continue to give you food with no help from you. So the reason that's at the top of my list right now is because I have asparagus coming up right now, and I am so excited. This is the 4th year for asparagus, 4th or 5th year. And so I think this year I'm going to get a decent harvest, which is really exciting. Asparagus does take some time to go. But this is something that if you're going to put in a garden, if you're interested in gardening and you like asparagus, and if you say you don't like asparagus, roast it with some olive oil, salt and pepper, and a little bit of smoked paprika, and tell me you don't like it then I'll believe you. If you haven't done that yet, you have to. That made me a convert. I hated asparagus before. I love asparagus now. Anywho, asparagus is coming up. So if you plan where you're going to put that, that could be a great perennial that you know you're going to get every single spring. It is a vegetable. It's not going to be very filling. But again, it's something that it's food. It's free food. It's free food that you don't have to do anything to get. The second perennial that I would really recommend is berries. Raspberries, blueberries, blackberries. Those are my top 3. They're bushes. If you can kind of put them at the end of your property, kind of out of sight, out of mind, because they are, blueberries aren't ugly, but raspberries and blackberries are bushy and messy and thorny. But I have one black raspberry bush and one red raspberry bush. So I have 2 different varieties. And they taste different, so they give me the same food, but just completely different taste, which is fun. But I use them for jams. I use them for, let's say juices. I use them for pies. I make pie filling. I freeze them whole. I can turn them into smoothies. So when you have berries like that, that's a great, again, a free, and berries go wild. They will spread like crazy. So put them somewhere where you can kind of forget about them and let them go. I'm on a 1/4 acre property, and I have raspberries kind of like tucked along my fence. They're not pretty. I ignore them, but they give me so much food every single year. One of my breakfasts this morning was just yogurt with raspberry jam from my berries last year and granola. So that was my jam, not my yogurt, not my granola. We're working on that, but it was my jam. Especially if you eat a lot of fruit. I think berries could be, or jams. If you do a lot of peanut butter and jellies for your kids, if you do a lot of fruit smoothies, if you do a lot of baked pies, all of these things you could completely stop buying by planting it yourself. If you have the room to do trees, apple trees, peach trees, cherry trees, pear trees, all of the trees are a great idea. I have a couple. I have 3 peach trees and 2 apple trees. So I have some, but get them started now. If you're thinking about it, if you have the space, get them started now. And again, that's free food. And once you kind of get into bigger things like the trees, apples, pears, peaches, they're all going to give you so much food. Again, you're talking the jellies and the jams and the pie fillings. But then you can do things like applesauce and pear sauce and more juices, and you can dehydrate them and have like the apple crisps and apple chips and pear chips and all that stuff. Again, it's free food. You have to do something with it, but it's free food and you know exactly what's in it. Some additional perennials, I would say, A lot of herbs. For me, sage is a huge perennial. Never realized sage was a perennial. That is a huge perennial for me. Major jam is a perennial for me, and cilantro is a perennial. Rosemary is there. So I have 4. Those are my 4 biggest perennials. So you plant them once, and they keep growing. So rosemary, I love rosemary. I use that herb all the time. It is beautiful. Sage is one I didn't use a lot of, but last year I did it for the very first time. I made a sage pesto. Instead of a basil pesto, I made a sage pesto, and I thought it was honestly delicious. So you need a good amount of sage to make a pesto, but again, it's free. The sage is free. You still have to get the oil and the nuts, but the sage is free. So think about the perennials that are perennials. Okay, think about those and what you want to, and I recommend, don't just say like, I'll do it next year. Do it this year. If you're going to do a garden, make that your goal this year, to get your perennials in. Get them in once, you harvest them for years to come. So those are the main perennials, at least for me. There are some others. I think rhubarb, I'm pretty sure rhubarb is a perennial. Strawberries are a perennial. They absolutely are. I just never have any success with strawberries in the ground because I have a lot of rodents. I have a lot of mice and squirrels and rabbits. So I don't do well with strawberries in the ground. But if you have a space you can kind of protect them, that's another great perennial. And then we're going to start talking about some things that are not perennials, but ways that you can make them perennials. So the next thing that I think you should focus on if you're starting your garden, or you're thinking about starting your garden, is what is going to give you the most bang for your buck? Where can we take it the furthest? So I'm going to say right off the bat, tomatoes, best bang for your buck. Tomatoes, you can make salsa, make tomato soup, you can make spaghetti sauce, pizza sauce. I take the skins from making all that stuff and I make tomato powder, I make tomato jam. Tomatoes make a lot of sauces, barbecue sauces, ketchups. Tomatoes make a lot of sauces, and they're bases for soups, like chili base, tomato soup, a roasted red pepper soup has a tomato base. So it's great for bases. So I would say tomato is the really great bang for your buck. Plant a couple plants, harvest a lot of tomatoes, and figure out what you want to do with all these tomatoes, kind of how to put them back. And again, just kind of giving you a little bit of a pantry to pull from, so you don't have to buy things from the store. And tomato products are really easy to work with. Salsa, spaghetti sauce, chili base. Those are some of the first things that I think everyone learns how to can when they get a garden. So that's where I would say you should start. Definitely put some focus on some tomatoes, and then do some research on the type of tomatoes. So Roma tomatoes are great, or Amish paste tomatoes are great for things like sauces, salsas, things that you want to be thicker because they have less of a water content than, you know, an Eden tomato, like a beefsteak tomato. So you can play around with the different varieties, but I would say just get some varieties in the ground. Doesn't honestly matter what you get. It does once you're into it for a little bit, but if you're brand new to gardening, I say plant the tomatoes, plant what looks good, and then plan how you're gonna preserve those items. Some things you don't have to can, you can freeze. The next thing that I would say is so prolific is gonna be peppers. Peppers are so prolific. They're so easy to grow, and they freeze incredibly well. So if you're not on the canning train, you can freeze peppers. You can slice them, you can chop them, you can cut them. They freeze great. You thaw them out, they're perfect. I always plant 2 jalapeno plants, and those 2 jalapeno plants become jalapeno poppers. They freeze beautifully. I make the poppers in the summer, put them in the freezer, and I eat them all winter. They freeze. You never would know that they were frozen. You can make stuffed peppers. You know, you pick the pepper off the plant, stuff it, put it in the freezer. Whenever you want a stuffed pepper, pull that pepper out. You can do it as a casserole, or I've stuffed banana peppers and just had it as individual banana peppers. You can make roasted pepper soups for the freezer. You can make spices. You know, you can get these peppers, you can dehydrate them, you can make your own spices with them. I make my own crushed red pepper flakes. I have the ability to make paprika. I don't go through paprika that fast, so I bought a big container like 3 years ago, and it's still kicking. It's not going anywhere. But you can make a lot of your own spices. So peppers are something that go so far, and I've done a lot of videos on how I use my peppers, what I do with my peppers. So if you're interested in that, you can definitely check out some of my previous videos. But again, you get a lot of bang for your buck. So you don't have to plant a couple plants and you get a ton of peppers. And again, there's so much that you can do with them. The third thing that I'm going to say is the biggest bang for your buck is potatoes. You need a little bit of potatoes and you can grow a ton of potatoes. And potatoes that you grow and you cure, and by curing it means you kind of just like lay them out and let the skin harden before you store them in like I typically store mine in a basket. I pulled my tomatoes around July 15th and I kept them in the basket fully up until probably, well, it was Christmas break when I canned the potatoes, and they were growing eyes, and they weren't wrinkly, but they were starting to grow legs. So I got them all cleaned up and I got them canned. But they lasted for 6 months in my basement. The potatoes you buy at the store are not going to do that. And you can take the potatoes you buy at the store, put them in the garden, and then that will give you a year's supply of potatoes. So, again, I think that's another great product to put on your shelf, or not even to put on your shelf, to put in your garden. You don't have to do anything to kind of preserve it. Put it down in your basement and then eat them, or put them in not a basement, but like a cool, dry spot. I put mine in my basement. And you can eat from them for months and months and months. And you could also I like to shred a whole bunch, and I have frozen hash browns in the freezer. You can cut them up in French fries and just put French fries in the freezer. So you have a lot of options here, but it works. You don't honestly do anything with them. You can just grow them and then store them, and you don't have to do any preserving with them. It works fantastic. The next thing that I think is a lot of bang for your buck are going to be green beans and cucumbers. Green beans and cucumbers give you a ton, and you can preserve both of them. Green beans, I just like to put in freezer bags and put directly into the freezer. I don't blanch them, I don't do anything, and they freeze up great. So there's no canning, there's no processing, just take off, put in a bag. Cucumbers make great pickles. That's a great easy thing to make, great easy first canning project, but one plant gives you so many. So these two are really great bangs for your buck. Cucumbers and green beans just keep giving you food. So I would say those are kind of the best bang for your buck plants. They're plants that don't need to take up a lot of space. They're plants that if you don't have a big garden, we've only talked, I think, about 5 different plants. So you get 2 tomatoes, maybe 3 pepper plants, and 1 green bean and 1 cucumber. And then you have a potato barrel. You could have a relatively small garden and still grow a ton of food. So if you're interested in gardening, you're thinking about it, that's kind of where I would recommend you start. Start there, see if you like it, and then next year we can go up a step and keep going. I would like to give honorable mention to cabbage and broccoli. If you have the space, cabbage and broccoli also are so prolific. The problem with each of them, so cabbage is one plant. So if you think of 1 cabbage at the store, that's 1 plant. So you need, so I plant around 6 to 8 cabbages a year depending on my needs. And I make my own coleslaw out of that. I make cabbage steaks. I make sauerkrauts. I make one other thing that I'm blanking on right now. And then there's fresh eating, of course. But I need a couple of different cabbage plants to get all that cabbage. And then that does take up a little bit of space. But it is a little bit of space, but these are heavy plants, or heavy cabbage heads. And when you get them all shredded up or cut up, they do take up a lot of space. So these are not as kind of tightly packed. You can't kind of pack these together and grow them. They do take up a little bit of space, but they do give you a good amount of food. And broccoli is the same way. A broccoli plant that you buy from the grocery store when you buy a broccoli head from the grocery store, that's one plant. One broccoli gives you one broccoli head, and that's right. But I am a huge advocate of eating all of the little heads that broccoli gives you. So it gives you the one main head, and then it'll put up tons of little florets, tons and tons and tons. And you just can go I go every day through like end of June, just cutting off these little florets, and they get smaller as it gets hotter outside. But you can have a nice size floret, and then what's nice is you're not taking a big broccoli head and cutting it up into little florets. It grows in little florets as is. So that's great for fresh eating, and then I think broccoli freezes okay. It's not going to be the same quality that the fresh broccoli is, but it's 100%. I blanch it, I freeze it, and I let it thaw completely before I roast it. If you put it in anything, like if you put it into a casserole, you're not going to tell. If you put it into a soup, you're not going to tell. But if you're trying to eat it as like a side, you're going to tell that it's not fresh broccoli. But I still think it tastes better than the store. I know what's in it, and it essentially was all but free for me to grow it. So again, if you have the space, I grow no less than 18 broccoli plants a year, and that gives me a year's worth of broccoli for fresh eating and for the freezer. So if you have the space, those are 2 additional plants that I would recommend growing. You need multiples of them. They are going to take up a little bit of space, but I think they are another great kind of bang for your buck. It takes up more space in the garden, but you do get a lot of food from them. So these are just some things I had in my head that I thought about both when I was starting my garden and even now I'm walking around my garden, and I wish I had put more of an emphasis on the perennials. So like my asparagus and my sage, I literally grew on top of each other because I didn't know sage was a perennial. My asparagus also, I didn't want to devote a bed to my asparagus, so I just have it kind of like willy-nilly through my property, instead of in one kind of, long bed or something like that. So there's nothing wrong with that. But if I wish I had been able to have the foresight and the knowledge to put a little bit more thought into my garden and into my property, it would have paid off better. I'm still in a really good spot, but there are some things that I wish I could change. So if you're thinking about starting your garden, these are the things that I think about, the things that are important to me, and the things that have made me the gardener that I am. And like I said, this was kind of all over the place. This was kind of rambly. I got on a couple of soapboxes there, so I apologize. But if you're thinking about having a garden, I think this is the year to do it. We're early in. You can go to the grocery store, or not the grocery store, but you can go to the local nursery, buy a couple plants, throw them in the ground, and see what happens. I don't think you're going to regret it. If you water them, if you give them the attention that the plants need, I don't think anyone that grows a plant is mad that they grew the plant. So I think give it a year, give it this year, and see what you think. And I don't think you're going to be let down. Thank you guys for joining me on this little bit of a rambly video. If you are deciding to start a garden this year, drop it in the comments. I would love to follow along on your journey. Or if this is a regular garden year for you and you've been doing this for years, I'd also like to know about it. I think we could talk about some stuff. Thank you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye, friends.